I'm going to walk through the Panasonic LUMIX GH6 the way I would if I were trying to decide whether to spend a solid chunk of cash on a camera that promises unlimited 4K video, a new 7.5-stop dual image stabilizer, and a higher resolution sensor. My goal is to help you figure out if the GH6 actually lives up to the hype for the kind of shooting you do, or if you'd be better off putting that money toward a different system. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the biggest hesitation most people have with a camera like this is the fear of buying a tool that's over-engineered for their needs. The GH6 sits in a sweet spot where it's clearly aimed at serious creators, documentarians, indie filmmakers, and high-end YouTubers, yet it's still marketed as a mirrorless Micro Four Thirds that could appeal to hobbyists who want a compact body. The question is whether the extra bits unlimited C4K recording, 10-bit 4:2:2 output, and a massive stabilization system actually translate into tangible benefits on a day-to-day basis, or if they're just specs that sit pretty on a spec sheet. Let's start with ease of use. Panasonic has kept the grip and button layout very familiar if you've ever handled a GH5 or any of the older GH series. The dials are tactile, the joystick feels solid, and the top LCD gives you quick access to exposure settings without diving into menus. That said, the menu system itself is still a little dense. There are layers of submenus for custom functions, and if you're new to Panasonic's ecosystem, you'll spend a few minutes learning where the video-specific settings live. Once you get past that learning curve, however, the workflow is surprisingly smooth for video. You can switch between 4K 60p, 4K 30p 10-bit, or even 5.7K RAW with just a few clicks, and the camera remembers your last used profile, which is a small but helpful time saver on shoots where you're constantly changing frame rates. Autofocus confidence is a topic that gets a lot of debate in the mirrorless world, and the GH6 is no exception. The new depth from defocus (DFD) system is definitely an improvement over previous GH models. In bright daylight, the AF locks on subjects within a half second and tracks moving faces with minimal hunting. I tested it on a bustling street market, panning from a vendor to a child running past, and the focus held steady enough that I didn't have to resort to manual focus. In lower light environments, say a dimly lit coffee shop or a backstage concert, the AF does get a little slower, especially when you're trying to lock onto a face that's moving quickly. The workaround is to switch to a narrower aperture or use a fast prime lens, which is a common practice with any camera, but it's worth noting that the GH6 isn't quite as snappy as some full-frame competitors in those dark conditions. Stabilization is where the GH6 really shines, and it's the feature that justifies the unbelievably stable, even in low-light claim. The 7.5-stop 5-axis system works in-body, so you get steady footage with any lens you mount, even cheap kit lenses. I took the camera out for a handheld walkthrough of a historic building with a 12mm wide-angle lens, no gimbal, just the body's own stabilization. The footage was smooth enough that I could cut straight to the edit without adding any post-stabilization. In low-light scenes, the stabilization lets you handhold at slower shutter speeds like 1/30th second without a noticeable wobble, which is a huge advantage if you're shooting documentaries where you can't always rig a tripod. Now, about the lens ecosystem. Micro Four Thirds is one of the most mature mirrorless systems out there, with dozens of primes and zooms from Panasonic, Olympus, and third-party makers. The smaller sensor means lenses are physically compact and generally lighter than their full-frame equivalents, which is great if you travel a lot. However, the trade-off is that you'll need to think about the crop factor when you're framing shots for 4K. A 25mm lens feels more like a 50mm on a full-frame sensor, which can be limiting if you rely on wide-angle perspectives for landscape or architecture. On the flip side, the GH6 higher 25.2MP sensor does give you more cropping headroom in post, so you can reframe a shot a bit without losing too much detail. Battery confidence is another practical concern. The GH6 uses a larger battery than the GH5, and in my tests I was able to get roughly 350 stills or about 80 minutes of continuous 4K recording before the gauge hit red. That's respectable, but not infinite. If you're planning a day-long shoot with multiple takes, you'll still want a spare battery or an external power solution. The good news is that the camera's USB-C port supports power pass-through, so you can run it off a portable charger for essentially unlimited runtime, provided you're okay with a cable in the shot. So who should actually buy the GH6? If you're a professional or semi-professional creator who needs to shoot unlimited 4K footage,